comedy, pop culture, and everything in between. By idiots, for idiots. Welcome, sinners. This is Sports Idiot Nation.
Welcome into 2025. Happy New Year to everyone. I am Adam Marino along with T.I., Mr. T.I., and Miles Behind Enemy Lines, and a special guest. This is Sports Idiot Nation. And T.I., you know, we've talked about just video games come up so much, and video games over the last few years have evolved so much. And so we have a guest today, and tell us a little bit about why he's here, and just looking at his background looks pretty awesome. I'm excited to get into some stuff here.
Oh, hell yeah. So this is my buddy Jeff. As you two fellas know, I'm very into the retro gaming, lived my life in the arcades and just grew up in the Nintendo era. And so naturally, anybody that's on the internet that's paying homage to that and doing a damn good job, of course, I'm going to have my finger on the pulse there. And Jeff and I have been following each other for a while. I've followed him on Instagram on my kind of alternate page that not a lot of folks know about. I have a 8-Bit Monday Instagram account, and that I started back during COVID just for something to do because we were all stuck indoors. And I was following Jeff then, and then I started following him on Facebook and vice versa. And yeah, so when I decided it was time for us to do a retro gaming episode, naturally he was the first person I thought about. And yeah, so I invited him on, and here we are. And just look at that beautiful freaking background. So Jeff, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself? And first of all, thanks for hopping on the show, man. It means a lot because definitely I love what you do with your pages, love all your collection, love your humor. You're pretty much doing what I do on the football side to Nintendo, and I love it,
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. And I agree, man. Like I love watching your stuff too. So I'm Jeff from the NES page. I have a page on Facebook that I'm probably most active in that I started a while back. And I'm a collector. So as you can see from my background, I've been collecting for quite some time. And I just love sharing that stuff online. And it's kind of weird because I started meeting people like T.I. when I started sharing my collection on Instagram. So I got on there and started realizing there was like a whole world of people that actually collect this stuff. And this was really before it really kind of was in the mainstream. And so it was kind of tight knit especially on Instagram. So it was really cool to get on there and see that there was other people out there like myself that was hoarding and looking for this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I had no idea. I thought that, I was just one of these weirdos that couldn't let go of nostalgia. And then once I started kind of diving in there and realized it was like, oh, wow, like there are people like me out there. They're equally obsessed with piling things in their closet and staring at the covers of games for 4 hours and, attempting to play them sometime, but most of the time just collecting them and looking at them, So I definitely get it. I know we're around the same age. We've talked a little bit on Instagram. I know you some of your earliest memories as well are similar to mine. I know we've talked before about, the arcade era and just growing up in arcades and how much they meant to us as kids. And so kind of take us back. Like, what are some of your first memorable gaming experiences? Like whether it was an arcade or whether it's your first console, like what are some of the most like heartfelt memories that are important to you,
I mean, I think the arcade was definitely my first probably like social gaming type experience. Going to, there was a mall near where I live. I live in North Carolina, and there was a mall that we used to go to, and they had an arcade in there, which, funny enough, kids, a lot of malls had arcades back in the day. A lot of places had arcades.
Yep.
It was just kind of a place for like the kids, the teenagers to go hang out. And that was probably my earliest memories of like seeing other people playing games was at the arcades. And it was cool because I was going in, I was born in the early 80s. So the arcades were still a thing, and people were still hanging out in them. And it was just cool to go in. And I was a little bit younger than some of the other kids that were in there. But I mean, it's cool because you're like seeing teenagers and they're playing, games like Street Fighter or something. And they'll literally have like an audience standing around them watching them play. And I just remember like watching them and seeing how good they were at the game. And I was just like, dude, that's so cool. And you just want to try to get a turn. But of course those early times going when I was really young, it was hard to get a turn on the arcades.
Yeah, you had to slide your quarter up there on the little railing and like let people know you had necks, you know,
like playing pool.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, you put the little quarters up there to let them know you had next. But the popular machines, the kids that were on it, it was like, it was tough, because they're like, oh, whatever, kid, get out of here, like let the big kids play.
yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, that's probably my earliest memory of like being out and seeing people playing video games, and which obviously was in arcades.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. We had an arcade office in my local mall as well, Tilt. But I had a couple.
Yeah,
there were a couple. Oh yeah, we had a Tilt down here. Did you have a Tilt?
Yeah, dude, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I mean,
wild,
you had
man.
like Tilt, Aladdin's Castle. I'm sure you had chains of different ones all around, but
yeah.
we had this place down the street called Bellevue Billiards, and it was this seedy bar that no kid needed to be at. There were bikers hanging out. There were pool tables, dartboards, you name it. But they had 3 or 4 rows of arcades, great games. And those were some of my earliest memories because I've kind of alluded to before on the show to people that are familiar. Like my parents split up when I was real young, and so my kind of leeway between hanging out with my father with my grandmother, and a lot of times out Friday and Saturday nights, it was like that's where they would take me, and I would go to these arcades. And I remember playing Super Mario on the Versus machine, where it was like Super Mario one side and Duck Hunt on the other. And when it first roughly came out, I guess, in the arcade, and I remember having like a crowd of, random dudes behind me. Of course, my dad, my grandmother, but these people just watching this kid like play this game, and like, they obviously couldn't play it, and they would, always die, but they would just loved watching me. And like, so I was for years spent many times there. And then when the kids in my neighborhood got a little older, we had one of our guys in the neighborhood was a couple years older. He got his license for us, so we would go there on Friday, Saturday nights and just play all the time. My aunt managed an arcade in Madison, and during the summer I would go out there with my grandmother, and she would just give me rolls of quarters from the register because they were just getting pumped right back in. And I played just all day, anything, everything. Like that's where I remember walking in and being like, seeing the 4-player Ninja Turtles and be like, what is this?
That and Simpsons.
Yeah, Simpsons and X-Men. Like those were game changers. Of course, like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, of course, those were game changers as well. But once you started getting those 4-player beat 'em ups start popping up in the arcades, that's when you really started. Like you said, you get to see the camaraderie, and you get to meet other people and play with like-minded players and things like that. Those are kind of like some of my favorite memories. And one of my favorites is my all-time favorite arcade game, as silly as it is Miss Pac-Man. I just have this appreciation for it. I'm obsessed with it. I'm really damn good at it. But there was this pizza joint right down the street, and they had a sit-down tabletop Miss Pac-Man, and it was a speed run one. It was a fast one, and I would play it. And these kids, like I still remember it. These kids would go to their parents and get quarters and come back and give them to me just to watch me play. And I remember as a kid being like, thinking, this is crazy, but this is also so cool. I mean, I was probably like 7 years old or something, but that definitely, like, arcades are still super important to me. There's a couple arcades around here, and each chance I get, I go,
Barcades.
Yeah, barcades. I mean, there's Game Terminal up here, which is awesome. I mean, it's all the games are free. Pinball is not, but they got a great bar. All the staff's super cool. Bartenders are cool. One of the bartenders is a huge Memphis Grizzlies fan. I'm always up there. Sometimes we're talking Grizzlies for an hour and not even playing a video game, so it's just a cool spot. I like to go there a lot. But, Adam, you and I are the same age, roughly. You and Jeff are probably more closer in age. But, I mean, what are some of your first, like, arcade, memories,
So Tilt was mine, and I remember being a little bit younger, and that idea of go away kid, like we're playing right, like totally resonates with me. I was in the same boat. But Ninja Turtles, Simpsons, I remember for my group of friends, all my group of friends had younger siblings. And where do younger siblings like to go? Chuck E. Cheese. And it's not even close. Like, I don't even know what second place is. Second place to Chuck E. Cheese was you were grounded and you didn't get a birthday party. That was second place. There was no second place. It was Chuck E. Cheese and shut your mouth. So, but I was a little bit older, and so I would just play Simpsons arcade game there. And I was really, really good with that vacuum cleaner. That Marge Simpson, I tell you what, she don't play, bro. With that vacuum cleaner. And Turtles was just, we've obviously talked about Turtles a lot. We have launched Turtles Idiot Nation. We've had an episode just on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Obviously, I loved the arcade game. I loved how it was a little bit different than Nintendo. Say your pues, Toidles. I love how he would actually say it, because on Nintendo, he wouldn't. But on the arcade, it was just a little bit different. Enough to where the point was like, no, I want to go play it. Yeah, but don't you have it on Nintendo? Mom, it's not the same. All right,
Turtles
I'll
Arcade at home. Yeah. No, yeah. Well, it was also too what was so awesome. It was like you were watching a cartoon because the graphics were so good. You hadn't seen graphics like that. You got I guess you either had the voice samples or the voice actors. I don't know really what was going on there. Probably the samples from the cartoon, but still, it was like you were watching the cartoon and playing the cartoon. The animations are great. And all the villains, like you just had everybody. It was just so well done.
Yeah, the hardware on the arcades was, a step above what we had at home, So I remember talking about the Turtles in particularly, we had a place called Fuddruckers, and upstairs was like a restaurant, and then downstairs was an arcade. And we went downstairs, and I remember I fed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade. I think my dad gave me $5, and I put the whole thing in there. Like you said, meeting friends and like meeting people at the arcade. Like I met this other kid, then we met these other two kids, and we were watching them, and we kind of saw they were pretty good at the game, and we were like, all right, let's all play it. And I think I was paying for all four of them too, right? So I put the whole, we put the whole $5, all the quarters come out, you get like a whole bucket of quarters, and I think we got very close to the end. I don't think we beat it, but my memory serves me well. We got really, really far, and before my parents came down, we're like, all right, it's time to go. But it's such a fun game, that 4-player action, and
man,
like you said, just meeting people at the arcade, that was awesome.
Yeah, we only got to beat it, me and my cousin and I, when we were at the arcade that my aunt managed, because it wasn't our money, and it was just free money, and that's the only way, because those games are meant to just drain your quarters,
Yeah, they are.
It's the whole design of it, but and Miles, I know you obviously a different era, but I mean, I know you've got some memories there, some gaming experiences, but did you ever spend a lot of time in the arcade?
I'm so young. My first memory of arcade is the movie Wreck-It Ralph. No, I'm kidding. But that movie actually does remind me of one of the first arcade games I ever played. Don't remember what it was called. Don't care what it was called. But it was a racing game at my uncle's lake house in his garage. And what I remember most about that game is it was actually pretty violent. Anytime you crashed, the open wheel, the like Indy car style race car would just go up in flames. Like that digital driver was dead every single time.
That's pole position, probably. That's probably.
I was going to say it sounds like pole position.
You know what? That might be.
He's too young, guys. He's too young.
No.
It,
This is my uncle, who is a throwback dude. That arcade game was from more than 10 years.
Yeah, probably the 70s,
20, 25 years before. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, the dude's got Corvettes from the 50s and 60s to explain this type of cat. So that was probably pole position. That makes a lot of sense, especially with the graphics on that. Like, this is Stone Age we're talking. But beyond that, like, I didn't have a game console myself till I was like 17 years old. So I grew up really not, going to the arcade. Yes, Chuck E. Cheese was still a big thing.
What were you into, chicks?
First grade birthday. Well, I was into skee ball was my thing at
skee ball
at Chuck E. Cheese. But I remember gaming with my cousin. He had like Star Fox and Diddy Kong Racing, which I will
Slippy.
to this day say I think that Diddy Kong Racing is a better game than Mario Kart, and I will die on that hill.
Well, thanks for joining us on today's episode. That's all the time we have for.
Sorry, folks. But I was
Blasphemy.
more of a computer gamer. Backyard Sports, which I am grateful to God are coming back. But Pablo Sanchez, Pete Wheeler, Keisha Phillips, those are
Sanchez.
my boys
goat.
and girls. Oh my God, dude! Dun, 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 dun.
There was
But
a lot
different
of good
era, no
computer
question.
stuff, like you had Wolfenstein that
yeah.
came out,
Oh, yeah.
like, oh man, Wolfenstein was a
Doom?
game changer.
Remember what Doom did to the
Doom.
world?
Well, sure.
yeah.
I mean, Wolfenstein crawled so Doom could walk, though. But
Yes.
yeah, but Adam, you talk about Chuck E. Cheese. Now, in my area, before it was Chuck E. Cheese, it was Showbiz Pizza, and you had Showbiz, as well. And Showbiz was it was a little different from Chuck E. Cheese because it was still just like classic
It was
arcade.
if you ordered
really.
on Temu.
And it,
Yeah.
well, I guess you could
Or
say that
wished.
less marketing, more creepy, but but at some point, a lot of those games switched to where obviously the arcades today, except for like the barcades, they're all like ticket oriented. It's all just mints for the kids to get tickets. And so at some point, Showbiz and Chuck E. Cheese, like they all crossed over. But you're right though, there was a time when it was just like the most magical place on earth, And so I had a couple birthdays at Showbiz Pizza,
So,
Man, the birthdays at the pizza place. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So, Jeff,
core
here's a
memory
question.
unlocked there.
Here's a question for you. Can you talk about every city in America has a place that's like Miles will know when I say McVan's Video Games. It's a local like mom and pop, and it basically looks like your background, Jeff, where it's just a sea of games and it's some guy, he's overweight and he's got a son who's nerdy and they have a staff of like two other guys and they just like it's a mom and pop and it's called whatever the guy's last name is or something, right? And you buy, trade, and they've got the systems out there that you can play some games a little bit, hang out, talk about the new game coming out, and look at Nintendo Power, read the magazine. You can just kind of hang out. And if you're 16 and able to drive on your own, it's basically heaven right there. You don't need to die. You're just right there in heaven. Was there a place like that for you in Carolina?
Yeah, we had the mom and pops. I mean, we had so early on there were a couple of, like bigger stores. I remember there was a place called Farmore, which it was like I think they had maybe a grocery store or a place where you maybe like a Walgreens or something that you could like rent games. But we did have this one place, and it's just like you're describing. It was kind of on the side of a busy highway, like a rundown building. You walk in there, their couches are from like the 70s, and they have VHS tapes, or at least the ones that we did, so back then a lot of places like that, the mom and pops would like rent VHS tapes, but then they would have like the game and stuff there too. So I do remember one place in particular, and it was just like you described it. There's people playing video games. The owner's kids running around. But yeah, we also did have a place, and they've actually came back and like recently. It was called McKay's Bookstore. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Yeah, we've got one here in like 10 minutes from me that I give way too much money.
Yeah, so they've there's been like a resurgence of those here, but I remember like 20 years ago there was one here that people would go and hang out at. Like it's kind of like what you were describing. And they had a little bit of everything, and I remember it went away like in, I don't know, 15 years ago, but we don't have one in Raleigh, but I've seen some of those popping back up.
Yeah, we've got, so when I was a kid, we had one called Xanadu, and it was the same thing, right? It was, they rented games, rented VHS tapes. They would have gaming tournaments every now and then. I participated in one time. I won one time. I got free rentals for like 6 months or something. It was awesome.
Do you remember what game it was that you
Yeah,
played?
so yes, 100%. So I will tell you. So it was around when the Wizard came out, and so that was a thing. It's like when 8 Mile came out, like battle raps were like
Yeah.
all the rage, right? So when the Wizard came out, they didn't do Super Mario 3. It was just a regular Super Mario Brothers tournament, you know. And so they didn't give any ground rules, right? And it was just like whoever can get the furthest before the time limit is up, that's who wins, right? So naturally, what did I do? Like I went straight to the warp zones, and they were like, "Nope, can't do that. Just qualified." And I was like, "Ah, well, you didn't tell me that." So they gave me another chance, and so I won it, and I played like for a couple hours and all that. So anyway, that night, never forget this. My brother, he's about 5-6 years younger than me. He had just been born. And I woke up and stuck in a dream, a nightmare, just screaming. And I was like, killer mushrooms are coming. They're coming to get Paul. They're eating through the walls. Like I had this crazy dream I couldn't get out of. And they had to call the paramedics out and they calmed me down. And I remember they asked my mom, I was like, well, did he eat anything weird or anything? I remember she said, well, he had some crystal burgers. The paramedics, well, that'll do it to you, you know. And like I'll just never forget that. But like I played Super Mario Brothers for hours at this tournament, you know, and then went home that night and had a nightmare. It just felt like I was stuck in this dream I couldn't get out of. You ever had like a dream where like you're dreaming but you just cannot get out of it? And you know, I was probably like 7-8 years old, you know. Like I said, my brother had just been born. He was still in his crib, so it was crazy. But yeah, that place was Xanadu. It was great. It was awesome. I mean, I can't tell you how many games that I've rented from that place. I mean, this fellow on my shirt was the majority of them. I mean, when I was a kid, I never owned a Mega Man game, but I rented Mega Man 1 through 6 every single freaking weekend. You know, loved them. And then, you know, there were a couple mom and pops places that over time, you know, we have Great Escape, which is still pretty big. They're comics, you know, games, records, you know, and then we have McKay's, like you're familiar with, but we have a couple, like there's a place called Game Trader still that exists, and every time I go in, it's the same person working. I'm pretty sure he's the owner. He's holding a game for me right now as we speak that I will be driving out to pick up tomorrow. You know, hopefully my wife doesn't watch this episode and hears that, you know, but but yeah, it's you gotta love back in the day, man. It's just before the blockbusters and the Hollywood videos kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say they ruined everything because we all have a lot of great memories with Blockbuster, but that was kind of like the beginning and the end for the smaller mom and pops, you know.
Yeah, the mom and pops. I mean, there was a certain charm to that for sure. You know, and you hear a lot of people. You know, when I post stuff sometimes about Blockbuster, you'll have people that come in and, you know, they're kind of like, oh, it ruined all the mom and pops, and you know, they're kind of like mad about it. But like you said, I mean, we had a lot of great memories too, just from the Blockbuster era, and just the little things that they did a little bit differently than some of the mom and pops. Because I mean, at least where I was, some of the mom and pops could be a little shady when you were in there sometimes, so you had to be careful which ones you were going to.
Yeah, of course. So they all had that one room, that one corner of the area you didn't need to go to. You're like, oh, what are the
back room?
Yeah, what's on these boxes? Oh, I shouldn't be looking at these boxes, you know?
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about how that was like a normal thing. It's like, oh yeah, all the rated X movies are over here. It's like, huh? What? Oh, okay. You know?
Yeah. And then it became a big thing. I mean, there was people, you know, like I felt like a lot of places would rent like VHS tapes or rent, you know, video games or stuff like that. It was just something that they would just like, you know, add on to their business. It was like they were. You know, I think I've even went to like some convenience stores before that had like a little section. In the back.
There was one by me that had grown up, and when we had the ice storm back here many years ago, they were like my savior because we where I was at, we were out of school for almost a month, and I was just like, wow, shit, I'm gonna keep going down here and just renting games like all the time. And man, I rented so many games and movies that month. It was like we'd wake up every day, or actually it was at night. They would call it off at night. We'd all be sitting in their friend's house and be like, all right, watching Snowbird, waiting. They'd be like, yeah, we're out. We're like, hell yeah. We'd go snowboarding or whatever and go play video games all day. Oh, it's magical. You know, who needs school when you got an ice storm, you know?
Exactly. Well, I know you referenced like the Wizard a couple times. and talking like, do you remember the scene where Jimmy's like playing and like they're watching him? He's like playing like Double Dragon or something. They're like, you
In
got
like
50,000.
in like the truck stop or something.
Yeah, you got 50,000 on Double Dragon. Like, that was that was the time where like people would actually walk up and watch you play.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's funny because, rewind to 2025 and I saw something the other day where it's like there's like more and more percentages of kids are watching other kids play video games more than they're actually playing video games.
Yeah, it's crazy.
YouTube channels.
My
are set
my
up that
son
way.
watches people play Minecraft all the time. I'm like, don't you
Yeah.
don't you want to play it? He's like, nah, I just like watching these streamers playing it. I'm like,
And then
crazy.
the next generation are going to be watching those people who are watching others play the games. And there was actually like
There'll be
a
some
meme or a
kid
short
watching
video
T.I.'s
of
son.
that. It was
Yeah,
like four generations of someone watching someone who's watching someone who's watching someone else watch a video of someone playing
Yeah, it's like those
any game.
posters where it's like the photo inside the photo inside the photo
Yeah,
thing.
it's like infinity.
The inception of video gaming.
Yeah, I was telling my son that. I was like, just watching this stuff is so weird to me. I said, when I was a kid, like, you borderline getting fights. Like, people are like, no, it's my turn. It's my turn.
Right.
Now you already had a
you're
turn.
like scrapping to get the controller.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just so wild. Now it's like, now you play. I'll just watch,
Now there's YouTube channels set up for you to just watch other people play. And speaking of YouTube, reminder, the best way to watch us is on YouTube. Follow Sports Idiot Nation wherever you get your social media. And then the most fun way to watch the podcast every Monday and Thursday is on YouTube. Jeff, let's real quick as well dive into some of your social media, because you have a ton of what Facebook is the most as far as like the most followers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my biggest platform. So I'm on Facebook at the NES page. You can also find me on Instagram at the NES page. I'm pretty much on all the others as well as the NES page. Some of them just aren't as active as others, but Facebook and Instagram for sure. We also have a website called the NESpage.com, and we have some articles on there just all related to the NES and the culture and the history behind it.
That's awesome. So
that was
how
one thing I
many
wanted.
followers?
Oh yeah, for sure. Break that.
On
Go ahead and tell
Facebook.
them there. Yeah. It's got
Facebook. How did you say? How many followers?
yeah.
Facebook. I think we have like 180,000 followers on Facebook.
Is that all?
That's awesome.
I just
awesome.
checked. It's over 183,000 because I just
Doing-
gave you a follow.
Doing the Lord's work.
Oh yeah.
Jeff's out here doing the Lord's work.
Right.
Spreading the love of the 80s gaming era of the NES. Yeah.
Well,
Who knew that was that many people that were into that thing?
Well, that's one of the things that I love about your page is that you see folks that have a lot of followers like that, and you see one of two things. You either see like the page is stale and there's not a lot of interaction, or they're posting everything except what they're about, right? And you literally, you live it, you breathe it, you post every day, and the passion with every single post you make, whether it's a funny meme or whether it's just a heartfelt moment or whether it's sharing a photo from your childhood, like the passion is there, and that's what it just draws me to your content. And so, like, if anybody out there that's into retro gaming, like, you have to give this man a follow for sure, because it's well worth it,
Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
For sure, dude. Well, one thing speaking of, I mean, obviously the NES page and your background as well, like we're both very similar. We're heavy Nintendo. But I know that some of your earlier gaming experiences were, consoles were before Nintendo. First console I ever owned was not a Nintendo. So, kind of what I'm interested to know about is, not only like what are some of the first consoles that you remember playing and that you really enjoyed, and then also what led you to be more passionate about Nintendo versus like Sega. There's a lot of folks that are kind of like, oh, I was more of a Sega person, and you had the whole Sega does what Nintendo don't and all that, which was a great, ploy and gimmick and everything. But and Sega's great. Like, I mean, Sonic, I loved all the Sonic games. I loved a lot of their stuff, but I still am heavy into Nintendo, and you obviously are as well. So like what was your defining moment there, not only just for Nintendo, but just like the home consoles in general?
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't have a Nintendo at first. The first console that we had in our house was an Atari 2600. It was
Same.
the wood grain one. You know,
Yep.
everything was
River
wood
Raid.
grain in the 80s.
River Raid. That was my game.
So, and I'm so happy that you said that, Adam,
Right on cue.
because we got River Raid right here. So
Nice.
this game is super dear to my heart because, to answer your question, Ti, like, so it was the 2600 was in our house before the Nintendo, and that is really what hooked me. I think on gaming. I mean, I was really really young. I'm thinking maybe 5, maybe 6, and watch him. It was my dad's console. It wasn't mine. And my
Yeah.
dad, I wouldn't consider much like of a gamer, but he played River Raid. And that was something that he and I would play I mean, it's like my earliest memory of playing video games in my house and with my dad was River Raid. So it's very near and dear to me. That copy I just showed you, I actually I got that a few years ago. It has the original receipt of when it was bought. It was bought in December of 1983. So some kid or adult got that copy back in December of 1983, and it lived a huge whatever life it lived before it landed here at my house a couple years ago. So super stoked to get that. And Atari was so we had one at home, but I would go to my grandma's house and my grandmother had one. And I don't know if it was hers or it might have been one of my uncles or something that just left it there. But we would play the tank game, Iron Tank or something. I forget what it was. That might have been the NES version, but
I thought you said the taint game. That sounds inappropriate.
Yeah,
That's a different kind of game.
Sorry, Grandma.
There was a Porky's Atari game, so I mean, hey, you
true.
just never know,
Dig Dug.
But yeah, so we would play that there too. But after to answer the second part of your question, we had the Atari, and then I want to say it was like 1987 is when I got the NES for Christmas.
Dude, we're like a parallel life, bro. Like that's the same. That's when I got mine. And Jeff, you gotta hear this story. You gotta hear the story of how I got my first NES. So I'm living in an apartment with my folks and a little kid, and I open up the closet and there it is. It's December and I see it. And so I tell my parents' friends, hey, Mr. LaTurner, guess what? I'm getting a Nintendo for Christmas. Well, he proceeds to tell my parents.
Oh no.
And so they wrap it and gift it to another family friend that we have over like the day after Christmas or whatever. And he opens it in front of me and he's like, wow, a Nintendo. And I'm like, what? In my head, I'm like crushed. My soul is dead. I'm dead inside. And then he looks at me. He goes, I don't want it. You could have it, Adam. I've never been so upset with my parents.
You got trolled. Your parents trolled you on Christmas morning.
Seriously, man.
Before trolling was a thing, your parents trolled you.
So much trauma. And then I proceeded to not take a bath or a shower for about 18 weeks as I just played Nintendo every day.
Oh, man. That's what we did. I mean, Nintendo, so I can't remember exactly what I saw or why I asked for it, or if it was more so my parents just picked, the hottest item, for kids that year. I can't say for sure if I asked for it. I'm pretty sure I did, but because I want to say I played it before at a relative's house, like a cousin, like an older cousin or an uncle or something. So I may have asked for it, but I'm not sure. But I will say, like at that time, there was like this huge shift in where like Nintendo just became like the thing. And it was like I mean, it's like if you didn't live through it, like there's certain moments
Miles
in
won't
your
understand.
life that like when something like that comes out, like it's like when when the first airplane was invented, right? Like when something
Yeah.
that never existed before. I
The
mean, we
first
had
car.
Atari, right? We had ColecoVision, and we had these other things, but nothing compared to when the Nintendo dropped. It was like a game changer.
Yeah.
And I mean, well, of course we don't need to get into it, but I mean, it saved that video game market, right? After the crash in 83. But the NES, I mean, when it came out, man, and playing the first two games I got was Super Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong Jr. And I mean, I was instantly hooked. And then we got Duck Hunt, and having the Zapper. It was just, I don't know, the 80s, 87, 88, around that time, it was just like a magical moment in pop culture history for everyone. For
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
And just to throw a stat out there, so by 1990, so that was like in 87, by 1990, 1 in 3 households in America had an NES in it,
It's
which is
wild.
insane to think about.
So wild. I mean, yeah, if you
I
equate that
love
today
this country.
to, equate it to like PlayStation or Xbox, like there's not 1 in 3 households that has that, like it's so wild. I mean, it's absolute game changer. You're right. Like it was before, obviously we know long before the internet, it's like you're uncovering secrets. You're talking to your friends on the playground, like, oh, I found this one cave in Zelda that you can bomb and get free rupees and like stuff like that, and it's just like, it was just so wild. I mean, now it's like, like I was playing Link's Awakening, the remake with my kiddo, and he was like, why don't you get on the internet and let's figure out how to beat this one apart? And I was like, no, we're not doing that. And I went and got my Nintendo Power of the Game Boy Link's Awakening, and I was like, we're going to find it in here. That's like, this is what I used to have to do,
That's
Now,
awesome.
was that cheating? Did you classify that as?
I mean, I can't necessarily say it's cheating, I mean, it was there, but like, I mean, I don't know, Jeff, I don't know if you ever did, but I actually called the Nintendo hotline a couple times to get unstuck, like,
sure.
Absolutely. The counselors, yeah. Like,
I mean, I
people
probably
today,
still have the
like,
scars from when my parents got the bill, so.
I know, right? Oh my gosh, I can only imagine,
So, and I when I say that, a lot of people will say, they're like, oh no, it was free. No, and it was free at the beginning. The Nintendo Power Helpline was free there for maybe a year or so, and then it switched to a 900 number. Nintendo, every time they realized, hey, this is a big hit, just like when they started putting the magazines out before Nintendo Power, it was like what Nintendo Club News or
Fun Club, right?
Or Fun Club,
Nintendo
yeah.
Fun Club,
So there was only like 7 issues of that or whatever, and then they were like, hey, we got something here, we can get a subscription going. By the way, if you have a Nintendo Power and you have the first edition, there was 2 different versions. One says free poster inside, and the other says free sample copy. So if you got the free sample copy, which they sent that out to people that were subscribed to the Fun Club. So if you were subscribed to the Fun Club when the Nintendo Power issue 1 came out, you got that in the mail for free. So if you have one that says that, you have a more sought after copy.
Yeah, I have my Nintendo Power situation is very tragic. I had them all. I had all the Fun Clubs. I still have 4 of the Fun Clubs. I had the original letter that they sent. I had all of this. I had it stacked.
That's awesome.
And then when I went to MTSU in 1997, I came back for the summer and I asked my mom, I was like, where are all my Nintendo Powers? She's like, oh, I got rid of those. And I was just like, what? So
Your
over
soul
time,
died?
I've slowly, yes, I was like you. Except I wasn't being trolled. I was just being punched in the gut. But over time,
That's like when
I
my
built them
mom
back up,
Yeah, that's like when my mom got rid of my Pokemon cards. I came home and realized that I had a collection worth like $6,500, and I hadn't touched it in probably a decade. But I came home, I was like, "Hey, Mom, looking for this binder of Pokemon cards." She's like, "Oh, I threw that out, and I figured you weren't going to need it." Oh,
yeah,
man.
it was.
I was like, "Well, I
hurt me.
can't take you on. I can't take you on that European cruise you always want to go on. So that's going to be on you then, Ma."
Yeah, Over time I've rebuilt my collection. I don't have every single one of them. I would say I have most, but yeah, I definitely don't have every one of them. I do have I did replenish my issue of #1, but it unfortunately says poster inside. But yeah, I know that would have been the one I had because, like you said, I remember opening the mail one day and I was like, "What is this?" And they would send you the binders. They would send you like the free binders, and they would always send you like these gifts and stuff. And oh man, it was what a time to be alive, But
yeah, well, that was when you actually, enjoyed getting mail, right? Before
yeah,
like junk mail, like, in the later 90s became like a big thing. And then, of course, in the later 90s, we had the emergence of the internet. So people didn't want like regular mail, right? We were wanting to get like email. And it's so funny, like thinking now, it's like now when I go out to my mailbox, I'm actually like pleasantly surprised when there's something in there. But we get thousands of emails a day. So you don't want to get any emails. You actually want to get something tangible in the mail.
So, but you were mentioning, your first games, and yeah, you and I talked with a couple chats on Instagram. Like, the way I got my Nintendo was again my dad. My dad, I think, enjoyed video games more than my mom did. And like I said, they split up when they were young. But I remember before my parents split up, I remember being in the International House of Pancakes when it was not IHOP, when it was actually called the International House of Pancakes.
Spelled out.
And they had an elevator action arcade game. And I remember my dad was in the back playing it with me. And my parents split up when I was like 5 or 6. So it would have been around that time frame. And my mom getting mad at him because the guy had a gun, and he was like, we shouldn't be playing that. So when my parents split up, of course, Christmas morning, I've got, He-Man action figures and stuff, and everything's great. But then my dad and my grandmother show up with presents. And of course, my dad's like, I'm going to win Christmas here. And he shows up with the NES, and I open it up and it was just like, no other presents mattered at that point. And the first 2 games that I had were obviously Mario and Ice Climber. Ice Climber was
Black Box game. Yeah.
Ice Climber was like the first like outside of Mario, the game that I just really loved. Still to this day, I absolutely love it. And there's some people that are not too impressed with it, but I just still think it's a classic Nintendo game. I love the artwork. I love the characters. I love how weird it is. It's just so weird. But yeah, those were my first 2. And the same way, it was just if you didn't really experience just all that, like going to Toys R Us and picking the ticket out and going up and waiting for the game, like you just going and seeing the wall of all of the options of games and just seeing games that you never knew existed. Like it's just not like today, Like, I get mad when I go and look at. I mean, I go and look at Switch games with my kiddo, and like they will photocopy the cover, right? And it's behind a locked door, but they don't photocopy the back of the box. And it's like I try to flip the thing up, I'm like, it's just a blank sheet, and it makes me so mad because I just remember as a kid, you get the game, you go home, you the whole ride home, you're staring at you're reading the instruction manual, you're just going through everything, and like now you don't even get instruction manuals, Like, I don't know if you're like me, but I stack like this big of instruction manuals. Like I just collect them. I love them. There's just something about them. My wife's like, why do you like those so much? I'm like, you just don't know. Like if you weren't in that ride home and you weren't flipping through this, like you just will never really know how much it meant,
Yeah. I mean, speaking of the instruction manuals, I don't know if you remember, but so when Super Mario Brothers 2 came out, the instruction manual was like pretty thick. It was like there was a lot of information in that one compared to the first one. So I remember having, and a lot of the other manuals that I had of games that I had, none of them were thick like the Super Mario Brothers 2 one was. And like I remember friends bringing them to school, like literally bringing the manual, instruction manual to school. And I had to. So fun fact. So Super Mario Brothers 2 actually came out on my birthday, not the same year, but the same date as my birthday, and which was in October. But I didn't get it for my birthday. I had asked for something else, and because I didn't know when it was going to be released. But so I had friends that were bringing the manual and stuff and playing Super Mario Brothers 2, and I was like, I want to play this game. It's like the one game we wanted because it's like it's the sequel to Super Mario Brothers, right? It's going to be the best thing ever. And look at this manual.
You can go backwards.
twice as thick, you know. But I had to wait to Christmas, and I got it for Christmas that year. So plugging back to my Instagram page, I actually have the video of me opening that on Christmas morning. So if you want to see that, check out my Instagram page at the NES page.
Yeah, I will, as soon as we're recording this episode, I will gladly go partake in that.
That's
you mentioned how much Super Mario 2 meant to you. I still, to this day, I know everybody is Super Mario 3 is the best, and I'm not going to argue because it's a fantastic game, but it still doesn't mean as much to me as Super Mario 2 does. I just love Super Mario 2. I was the same way. I had to have it. I was just obsessed with getting it. You know, there was a shortage. You know, it wasn't readily available. It was just... You're sitting there watching the news at night, you know, having dinner, and you're seeing stories about people waiting in line for hours to get that game. And it's just like, those stories don't exist anymore. Like, you just don't get that, you know, and it just took over every kid's world, you know?
It did. I tried to find video of that, but it doesn't exist as much. People weren't covering it as much, but you're right. Yeah, you would watch the local news and they would tell you, hey, they got, you know, this here or this here, and I mean, because that's how you got your news. We didn't have internet, right?
Yeah. What?
So Jeff, Jeff, I got a question for you, unrelated to that, but Ti mentioned about 10, 12 minutes ago about Zelda, and when I think of Zelda and certain games like that, I think about the music. I think with Zelda, it was like the Gerudo Valley. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but that music, man, still to this day, like I didn't even play Zelda, but there will be times where I like pull that up and like listen to the instrumentals of that, like the Mexican guitar or whatever. Are there like specific games that you like reminisce on the music, or will just like pull up the music and listen to like while you're driving around in the car or anything like that?
Absolutely. So, I actually, I do events, and I'll have bands that will come out that will play video game music, and you know, there's so many. There's so much music. Another a little quick backstory too. I used to be a music promoter, and I don't play in bands and stuff anymore, but I used to. So I love music, and the music for Zelda, the music for some of the the original Zelda, is just absolutely timeless. You know, when you put that gold card in and you hear the doo 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 doo, I mean, you see the waterfall. I mean, it's absolutely insane. It's perfect. But when you mentioned Gerudo Valley, so on my NES page on Facebook, the one of the things that kickstarted that page back in like 2015, 16 is I actually did a video, and I did a video of me putting a Raspberry Pi into a NES cartridge, and I used I believe the band was called Bitnal Landscape, or Bitnal. Sorry, Bitnal Landscape, if I'm messing that up, but they did a version of that song, and it was freaking awesome. It was so cool. And it's the Gerudo theme, and they just kind of modernized it a little bit, and I used that music in the video, and that video got like 14 million views, and that was like one of the things that made the video was that music, because it immediately people gravitated toward it, and they remembered that. I think that came out in like I think that was Ocarina of Time when we first heard that, but which would have been like closer to your era probably, but yeah, to your question, I Zelda for sure. I mean, God, there was so many. It's hard to even think off the top of my head. All the good soundtracks, you know. But yeah, there was so many of them.
Yeah, Mega Man's
cool.
Great.
And I know you're right, the Ocarina of Time, because I've listened to it and I've just see that title underneath it. So for only that reason, I know you're spot on.
Yeah, there was a band in Nashville that I don't know how they played outside of Nashville as well, but they were called the Proto Men, and they would do, and I didn't realize at the time, I was younger, and I would always see their shows and venues and stuff as I got older. I realized, but all they did was just Mega Man covers, and I thought it was great. But then, obviously, I'm sure you're well familiar with Bit Brigade. I know,
Yeah, 8-Bit Brigade.
yeah, yeah. So they have a tendency to pop in Nashville every year, like around the 1st of May, and that's when my birthday is. So for like the last 3 years, I've been fortunate enough to go see them, like around my birthday, and I'll just get a handful of folks together, of buddies of mine. They're the same thing, grew up Nintendo lovers, love Mega Man, love Zelda. And so yeah, last couple times they've come to Nashville, just been great, always a good time for sure.
Yeah, they even put like video and stuff. I think I've seen to some of their stuff, so they have like kind of video background to go with the music. But
yeah, so they have a guy on stage just like speed running it.
Yeah,
and they play everything from like the intro screens to start selects to character selects to everything. And I've seen them do Mega Man 2, Zelda, Castlevania, Contra. Right now they're on tour doing like Super Mario World and F-Zero. And they're just cool, man. And they always they're always manning their own merch booths and stuff. I mean, you're probably familiar with that being a music promoter, so you get a chance to really talk to them and everything. And they just really appreciate the fact that like people love what they do. It's like, I just kind of have a soft spot for them because anytime I see they come to Nashville, I have to just drop whatever I'm doing and go just because, it's what I grew up with. And I would kick myself in the ass if they came to town and I just missed one of their shows. Cause I mean, I think the most I've ever paid for a ticket was like $15, it's just like, why not?
Yeah. No, it's awesome. No, I am. There was Miles. So I was also thinking too. Mike Tyson's Punch Out when they're when he's training and he's doing he's like running.
Yep.
So I posted when you got the cityscape in the background
and the
password comes up. Yeah, I posted a video on the NES page of this guy, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but he does the music a cappella, and he like layers it.
Nice. Oh, that's
and
amazing.
It's freaking awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Got it. I can't think of his name. He's on YouTube. He hasn't posted in years. But he layers it, and it's so freaking cool. But if you go and look through my videos, you'll be able to find it. It says, Mike Tyson something. It's a guy, he's got a long beard, and he like records himself, and he just like layers it and does the whole thing, and it's freaking awesome.
And that kind of takes me to, we are called Sports Idiot Nation after all, but thinking about the music as well. And it may not be original for the video game, but of course I'm wearing my Grease jersey because I played a lot of FIFA in my day once I started to actually get a PlayStation and play those as a teenager. But just listening to music, they pull that music, they license it out, but it's just like still, there'll be times where I'll be like out mowing and I'll put on like FIFA 14 soundtrack and just listen to it. And then like another thought, not sports related, but Adam and I were talking the other week about, I think it was GoldenEye and like the pause music, and there's like memes or short videos going around about the pause music and just how epic that is. So Adam, you want to take it from there about like your memories with GoldenEye and listen to that pause music, the other theme music for James
as
Bond.
We got a little bit older and upgraded systems and things like that, at that age, like teenager, you can hang out by yourself with friends, like your parents aren't involved. For the Nintendo, as it came out, your parents were absolutely involved because you were little enough. But GoldenEye was something that you could grab a hold of yourself as a teenager and kind of do your own thing, and first-person shooter, and your hand going like this, like and navigating, and just you'd put it on pause and you could go do chores. Because like the music was like so cool.
It was epic.
Carried you through.
It didn't need to be that gangster though. It was just like
oh my god,
it had no business.
Perfect.
Yeah,
so hard.
Anyone listening right now, you can hear that music in your head. I know you can.
Yeah, I hear it right now. Yeah,
so good.
That was the Call of Duty before Call of Duty, before the SOCOM. That was like, it wasn't online gaming, but it was 4-player, We were playing my freshman year at MTSU. Like we were having tournaments, we were all playing it. It was either Mario Kart or GoldenEye. That's what you were doing.
Mario Kart.
you know.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
our age group for sure for N64, and I'll say like for me like N64, I had one, but that was my younger sister. That was really her era, and my brother who is in the middle child. He uh, going back to something that you mentioned earlier, Ti, about the Nintendo and Sega. So he was a Sega kid. So he had say I got the NES first, but then he got the Sega Genesis when it came out. And it was 8-bit versus 16-bit, right? The Genesis was 16, and we didn't get the 16-bit until the Super Nintendo came out. So yeah, there was a short window there where my brother was like, "Yeah, my console's better than what you're playing,"
Yeah, that was a funny thing. That's a good segue actually, because that kind of leads into one of the couple questions I wanted to ask you personally. But like, when the Sega came out, Sonic, I was seeing the commercials. I bought into it. I actually was like, hey, Mom, I kind of want a Sega, and she was like, well, figure it out because we ain't buying one.
They're
And
expensive.
my
We're a
buddy
Nintendo family.
was having his aunt was having a yard sale, and he had some things in it. And I remember I was over there and I was talking to him about it, and his aunt was like, "Hey, do you want to put anything in it?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I ended up putting my Nintendo in all my games. Like this is one of my first regrets in life. And I ended up putting my Nintendo in all my games, selling them at a yard sale. Probably sold them for way under than I should have, but I got enough money to, go buy a Sega. And I went and bought a Sega Genesis, and I loved it. It was cool and everything. But I ended up, eventually growing tired of it, and sold it to a buddy at school. And my goal was to get a Super Nintendo. And lo and behold, ended up getting a Super Nintendo that Christmas, and that was when my brother was born. And so, that was our thing for a long time, was Super Nintendo. And then, of course, the 64 came out, I think, in 96 or so, 97.
Yeah, 96.
Yeah, and I took it with me to MTSU. We were like, all right, what do you want, the 64 or you want the Super Nintendo? And he chose the Super Nintendo. I took the 64. I wish, that's my other second regret, is I wish I would have took the Super Nintendo, because I had anything you think of, naming from Chrono Trigger to, I had everything. And long at some point that was sold many times over to other people. I'm sure they'll tell them where that copy is these days. But when I went back to gather all of my Super Nintendo and things, like it was not there anymore, So like I still regret that, because I like the 64, I do, but outside of about 5 or 10 games, like it's just not my thing. Like I just think there was a lot of fluff. I think there were some really amazing games, like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, obviously, GoldenEye and Mario Kart, Mario World. I mean, Mario 64. Like, they were great games, but overall, like, it was a lot of rushed stuff. Like the Castlevanias and Mega Mans were just terrible, and it's like some of the core gaming memories for me that the 64 versions were not very good. So like, I regret first ever selling my Nintendo in games for the Sega, and then I regret choosing the 64 over the Super Nintendo, which I just had this like massive collection of games for. So like with that being said, like being a collector, I think like you've probably have sold things over many times. There's probably things you didn't want to sell that you did. There's probably things you could have bought that you didn't. So like, what are some of your biggest like gaming regrets as not only a gamer, but as a collector?
Well, there's one that really sticks out to me as from a collecting standpoint, and that was when I started collecting. So I started collecting for, well, just like you said, I sold all my stuff at yard sales to get whatever the newer system that was coming out, or the newer game, or maybe get a bike or some whatever it was I wanted. I would sell the stuff that I didn't play anymore, the older stuff, but so when eBay came out in 98 or 99, I bought some Nintendo stuff, and I bought maybe 30 games. So, but I didn't actually start collecting until 2013. And I want to say around 2016 when I started the NES page on Facebook in 2014 because I was actually collecting, and I actually started it, and it was called the NES Store, and I was reselling. Back then I could, Facebook had like a marketplace option. You could like make it like a page where people could come and just buy stuff. It was like an e-commerce page, and that's originally what started out. And I was just selling like duplicates. So I would buy lots, and then I would sell the stuff that I did, I already had, and I would keep everything I didn't have. But in 2016, someone messaged me on the NES page, and they said, "Hey, I'm in North Carolina too. I noticed that you mentioned you're in North Carolina, and I see that you're collecting stuff and this and that. I got a game called Stadium Events," and I was like, "Oh, well, that's pretty cool." And I didn't know a ton about the game, but I knew it was rare. And he was a car guy, and he was looking to build, like, he was like working on a car, and he needed some parts and stuff. And he was like, "I don't know if you're interested, but I got this game, and I'd be willing to like sell it for like $3,000." And I was like, $3,000? No, oh my God, no, man. Like, first of all, I was really broke at that time in my life, so that was just completely out of the question. But fast forward to, like, Google it, kids. Google Stadium Events. I mean, loose copies go for well over 10 grand, and I had a chance to get that at a bargain basement price at that time, which is only 8 years ago, which is not like it's not like back in the day. I mean, we're not rewinding that far back, but that's probably one of my biggest regrets as a collector, as a gamer, like growing up. I think one of the biggest regrets as I got into my 30s, my early 30s, is when I started becoming like nostalgic for the NES stuff. And some of the biggest regrets were just selling the childhood stuff that I had, my games that I loved. I spent hours and hours and hours and hours on, and I sold them to strangers at yard sales or places dirt cheap, or gave them away. I remember I had some of my games even when I first was in college, and I was 18 years old, and you'd have parties at your house. I had my Nintendo set up at one of our apartments, and you'd have a party or something, and I remember someone stole like my and these were the ones I bought back in like the late 90s, but like the Zeldas and the Mega Mans and the Metroids and Mike Tyson's Punch Out, they took all the good stuff. So I regret selling that stuff as a kid, and then fast forward into adulthood, passing on some of the stuff that I could have bought really cheap. And Stadium Events is just one of them, but there's really not that many of those games out there. But just buying sealed games and stuff like that, buying complete games. At the time, I was just buying loose copies of stuff. And
if somebody would have told us when we were kids, keep all the boxes.
Well, you know what? I tell a story a lot. You know what they told us to keep when we were kids? I mean, and Miles, he has the Pokemon, but like he should have kept you should have kept your Pokemon cards. Everyone's telling us at our age.
Hey, that's my mom's fault.
Yeah, everyone's at our age. Yeah, you didn't get rid of yours. Everyone was telling us to save our baseball cards and our our sports cards.
And it's like,
who doesn't, from our generation, who doesn't have at least a shoebox full of their childhood cards, right? Unless someone stole them, or like Miles, that your parents gave them away or something, or threw them in the trash. Like, I have a closet full of, at my parents' house, of and binders, tons of binders full of NFL cards. I got really into NFL. And that's why I'm a big fantasy football fan these days, is because you pick the players, right? So growing up, I was always a big fan of players more so than teams, because when I was growing up in North Carolina, we didn't have a football team. My dad was a Redskins fan, so we had the Redskins. But anyway, not to get too far off topic, but yeah, like we all kept our baseball cards, because at that time in the 80s and 90s, our parents, their cards were becoming really valuable. The Mickey Mantles and those era cards of the 60s and even in the 70s, but the 50s, 60s, 70s. So they were selling for big money. So they're telling us, hey, keep your sports cards. They're going to be worth a fortune. No, we should have kept our toys and we should have kept our video games.
I know, man. Like we talk about that a lot on here. I mean, I had we talk about Turtles a lot. I had the freaking Technodrome and everything in the box. Like the Technodrome in a complete box is like one of the top 10 most sought after toys in the entire world right now. And it's like, oh, I had that. Now I just have bits and pieces of it. And that was another thing too. It's like at some point along the lines, like I was able to keep all the figures and I got all my brother's figures, but at some point, like my mom got rid of all of all the accessories, all the vehicles, and I'm just like. She claims she never did. That's what all moms do. Oh, I never got rid of it. I don't know. I don't know where all He-Man and G.I. Joe's and Transformers went. They just miraculously disappeared one day. But
because it's plastic collecting dust. Yeah.
Yeah. So my biggest regret, I've got, other than like selling my collections, like as a collector, and I told you this story once. It's the place that I mentioned earlier, Game Trader. I was in there, 10 years ago, roughly, probably. And I'm looking up at the cabinet, and the guy's like, "Hey, man, I got that little Samson up there. You need it." And I'm like, "Huh?" And he's like $500, and I'm just like, "What?" I'm
exactly.
I'm like, how do I go home to my my newlywed wife, because we had just gotten married at that time. We're still living in the apartment. And I'm like, how do I explain to her I just went and spent $500 on a video game, right? And I just to this day I'm still just like, oh man, because I'm not sure what loose copies of Little Samson are now, but I know they're at least $3,000 or something like that.
Like they're in the $3,000 range for sure.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh man, I could have got it for $500. So that's like to this day the one that haunts me, but you can't let those eat at you. But it's hard to forget about them. You see people talking about their stories of how they got games or how they stumbled across stuff, and you're just like, yeah, that was me, but I was just too stupid at the time to realize what was in front of me.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could think about it in a lot of different ways. I mean, like I got buddies that bought Bitcoin back in 2012, right? They're doing all right, and they were trying to get everybody else to buy it, right? I remember I made a meme one time. There's that meme of that, like he's like a high school kid and he looks like he's about to blow. And it's like he I think I said something like this kid is trying to wait 2 seconds without talking about Bitcoin, right? Because everybody was talking about it. But had we all just bought it back then, it's like at $100,000 right now. If we all had time machines, we could go back. But
one of my nephews has a little bit of Bitcoin, and I'm always just like, oh, you bastard! Why didn't I listen to you? Yeah, why didn't I listen to you?
And they would not stop talking about it. So it's really on us, right? Because the people that were getting into it would not stop talking about it. I had friends that's all they talked about.
So
it's not like we don't know what it is.
There's two main things I want to make sure we hit. I want to know what your all-time favorite game is, and then I want you to give us a background about kind of what you do at the Raleigh Retro Gamers Association, and kind of give some plugs there and talk about some of the events you set up and what all that entails, because that's, to me, is like super cool and really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like that's a question I get asked a lot about, like, what's your favorite game? And I right now I probably have over 2,500 games in this game room, and but I mean, my favorite game, if I just had to pick one, it's gonna be Zelda. It's the original Zelda. It's literally a game that I spent countless hours and months and months and months and months trying to be on my own. And it was, as a kid, like, it put me in a different world of like this. I don't know. It was like an adventure. Like I was an 80s kid, so I was into BMX. I had like dirt bikes growing up, and we played outside all the time. But like when I was in the house, I was playing Zelda usually. And it was just like you had mentioned earlier, T.I., about like talking to your friend at school about like, hey man, you could use a bomb or a candle and light this bush on fire, and it like all of a sudden it's like doo 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 you know, like a staircase appears. Like that was like the coolest thing to me, just finding stuff in a game. And to me, it was like an open world, you know, and I've seen my son play Breath of the Wild. He started playing Breath of the Wild when he was like 4. And I watched him kind of have that same experience with the game of it just being open, and he's just running around, he's discovering things, he's finding items, figuring out what he's supposed to do with them. Like that was just it was just such a banger. Like what Miles was talking about, the music, man, I mean it had everything. So definitely Zelda. But you know, and you said this too earlier, Ti. But Super Mario Brothers 2 is going to be probably one of my most nostalgic games. Again, because I share birthday with it, and then on its release date. But it's just the anticipation leading up to it. It was you had to be there. You know, you hear people and they say, "Oh, Super Mario Brothers 2 sucked," and they talk about it being Doki Doki Panic and you know the origins of it. And you know, I'm like, dude, I don't care about any of that. Like, if you were a kid in the late 80s when it came out, like it was the thing to have.
That the meme that you shared, you know, of the people dancing at the party, you know, and it's like the one guy in the corner. It's like, well, a lot of people don't know that Super Mario 2 is actually Doki Doki Panic. Like, it's like that guy. I'm just like, we know that. Yes, we all know that
the story
by now. Like, please, like, just let me enjoy the damn game. Like, you know?
Yeah, let me enjoy it. They're like, it wasn't even supposed to be a Mario game. Yes, and you know what? That's to me adds to the charm because it wasn't. It was a completely unique thing. But nostalgia wise, definitely Super Mario Bros. 2. But best game of all time for me is Zelda.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean to talk about Raleigh Retro gamers. So when I started collecting, and that kind of led me into creating the NES page, and I created the NES page, and I started gaining some traction after that viral video, and that video went viral like January 2016, and from there I think I got like 15,000 followers from that one video.
Wow.
And that I was like, man. I was like, people, and I'm reading the comments. I'm like, man, all these people are like really into Nintendo. That's really cool. And they're really into the NES, and they're sharing stories and stuff that resonated with me. So I started just creating content around the NES. And that led me so fast forward, that was 2016, fast forward to 2018. I had been doing that for like 2 years. I had been creating content online. I'm like, all these people online like really love this. I'm like, but there's nothing in my like local town. Like I didn't know a single person in Raleigh, where I live in North Carolina, that played video game or played or collected for. They remembered the games, but they didn't collect or anything like that. So some friends of mine had just started like a Facebook group, and they were. You know, it was basically just a handful of collectors, and I joined. They asked me if I'd join in, and I joined. And it came up one day. It was like, man, it'd be really cool if we all got together and maybe bought and sold or like traded some of these games and stuff, because we were all collectors, and none of us, it was kind of the same thing. None of them knew other collectors in the area. So like the NES page was cool because I was connecting with all these people online, but they were online. So I was like, what can we do like locally in town? Because there wasn't any retro game stores or anything like that either. So what can we do like locally to get together? So I did a meetup at a local brewery, and I don't know. I think we did an NBA Jam tournament. I promoted it for a couple months, and it was just kind of a meetup in our group. There was maybe 100 people in the group, and I don't know, maybe like 40 or 50 people showed up, and we had 3 or 4 people that set up and up tables, and they were selling like old school games, and it was really fun for us. But what I noticed was the people at the brewery that had no idea we were going to be there that day, just random public, saw what we were doing, and they were like, oh dude, that's so cool. I haven't seen this in forever. I haven't seen this forever. I haven't seen this forever. At that point I'd been collecting for 5-6 years. So seeing a Mario game or, a Nintendo game wasn't that big a deal for me, but for other people, they were like, God, I haven't seen a Nintendo or in forever. And I set up
Yeah.
some CRT TVs, and I had Duck Hunt, and like a little league baseball team came in, and like these like 10-year-old kids were like playing Duck Hunt with the zapper and just like having a blast. And I had set up like N64, and I'd set up a Super Nintendo, and they were playing that stuff. I was like, look at these kids, man, playing like these games that we grew up with. So I was like, that kind of got the ball rolling on Raleigh Retro Gamers. So in 20, I think 20, well, COVID happened. So I had started doing like some bigger meetups, and then COVID happened, shut everything down. But while everything was shut down, I focused on building our community, our group. And then I ended up building a website. And in 2021, when things started opening back up, I started doing like events. And then 2022, I ended up doing like a huge event with the city of Raleigh. They actually gave us a giant park, and we had like 1,000 people show up to that. And it just, from there, it's just been like on fire, dude. Like the people that are into retro gaming and stuff now is just like through the roof. So now we do expos. We have anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 people come out to the expos. So at our expos, we have vendor markets. So we'll have 90 vendors selling just, retro games, and then also geek related stuff. So I started incorporating some pop culture stuff too. So like comics and Funko Pops and stuff that other people would collect. Like crafts that are around gaming, and especially like 8-bit era and the 90s era, because hey dude, when we're guys, right? But like if you come out and you got a girlfriend or a wife or somebody else, they want to buy stuff too, right? So we try to make it where there's something for everyone when they come out. We have stuff for the kids. We set up kid zones. If you've ever been to a gaming convention, that's essentially what we do. And we but the thing that kind of sets us apart is we've really made it community first. So these events that I do are free to the public. You're not having to pay $30, $40 for a ticket to go get into a gaming convention. You can actually come for free. And that's actually opened a lot of doors for us. We get a lot of press coverage from our local news stations and radio stations. I do interviews and stuff with them. They bring us on, and they're just like, man, this is so cool. I had, GameCube, and I had this, or I had an N64, and just hearing people's stories is just that's what it's about for me. It's all about the nostalgia, and something you said earlier, Ti, about like the NES page. Like it truly is a passion. Like not just the collecting, because I don't collect as much anymore. I mean, you see the room, but like I have everything I ever set out to get. And I mean, I'll still pick up something every now and then, but for me, it's just kind of showcasing the stuff and sharing it with others. And I have a son now, and he's all into Nintendo. So when you come out to our events, we have stuff, we have PS4s and PS5s, and we have Switch set up, and we have stuff like that for the younger generation too. But they're also able to play like the old school stuff, so they can. And it's so cool to walk up and see a dad or a mom there with their kid, and they're showing their kid, hey, this is what mommy played when she was little. Check this out, and the kid's playing it too. So it's really all about the experience. It's about the community, and we've built a striving scene here in North Carolina around retro gaming and just gaming in general. We do have like Epic Games is here, so we do have some really big game development companies, and we're known for some of the modern gaming stuff, but the retro stuff is really taken off, and that's what we do with Raleigh Retro Gamers, is just gaming experiences. And we do events almost every month. Every couple months we have something going on, and they range in size from 2,000 to 3,000 people to some of the bigger events, 6,000-7,000 people. So if you're interested in that, you're in North Carolina, or you're close by North Carolina, you can go to RaleighRetroGamers.com or at Raleigh Retro Gamers on Instagram. We're also on Facebook at Raleigh Retro Gamers. And you can always find all the information on our social channels and on the website about what we got going on. And we'd love to have you come out. I mean, I'm not going to lie, man. We have people that literally come from Florida and Ohio and
Oh, I
New
know.
York
Oh,
for
Nashville?
these
They come
events,
from
man.
Nashville?
It's crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
like I said, I've seen some of the events you put on, and I'm just like, and that's another thing that I really like about what you do. It's like you're passionate about what's important to you, but you also give back to the community with what you love. And there's a lot of people, they don't mean to be, but when they're very passionate about a hobby or an interest where they're good at something, they're very self-serving. And the fact that like you not only you have great social media, great content, you're also like building for the community, giving back to the community. Like it's just the perfect circle in a way, And I just think I admire it. And Nashville they have some events, but it's like you said, it's you got to pay to get there, and it's not always really what you want. It's a lot of the same old. And so it's like I really admire what you do, and hopefully Nashville can catch up to Raleigh sometime in that regard. Might have to pick your brain and may just have to do it myself. Who knows?
I got the blueprint, man. I can share it, and I'll tell you, like the blueprint really is like what you just said. It's really about being passionate about it and building the community first. We'll have people ask me like, "Oh, how'd you get started doing event stuff or this or that?" Yeah, and nowadays too, you guys have seen it with the resellers and stuff, that the rush on gaming and retro gaming, people trying to get it, and it's become really competitive, like on marketplace or because everyone wants to get it and try to sell it and flip it and make money. If that's what you want to do and you're using that to supplement income, like cool. But really, I came at it from a lens of like what you just said, like building a community first and building a community around it. And it's just been amazing how it's just resonates with the people that come out. And people, like, a lot of us are wearing like the pink shirts and say Raleigh Retro Gamers, and people will come up to us and they're just like, hey, thank you so much for like what you're doing, my kid loves this. Or hey, thank you so much for what you're doing, we love coming to these events. And we have a whole like cosplay community now, and a gaming tournament or esports community. And it's funny that all these other facets of the gaming world and the geek communities are starting to kind of all mesh together. And when you come to our events, man, it is so diverse. I mean, you got people of all ages, of all shapes and sizes and colors, and I mean, it's amazing. Everyone's just so cool, man. It's really the vibes. Like the vibes of an RRG event are just people having fun and having a good time. And a lot of us grew up with the gaming was such a big pop culture thing. Even if you weren't a gamer, you knew what Nintendo was, you knew what Sega was, you knew what PlayStation was, you knew what Xbox was. PC gaming, we haven't talked a lot about that. I mean, we mentioned Wolfenstein and Doom and Duke Nukem and
Yard
I mean,
sports, of
God,
course.
take it back to Oregon Trail, on the
Laser
Apple.
Suit
Oregon
Larry.
Trail. Hell yeah.
Odell
Trail.
Lake, I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many great computer games. I mean, we didn't even talk about Commodore 64. And I mean, that was some of the stuff. You can't see it in my video here, but I have a retro computer down here, and it's got Doom and Wolfenstein and Carmen Sandiego and some of the
My
awesome
sister loved that
stuff
game.
that we played. And for me, like the pop culture aspect and like the nostalgia of it is really what drives me. I don't like, this is all stuff in here. It can all go. It's not the stuff. It's the memory I have associated with that thing.
100%.
And you'll hear people talk about like, we just had Christmas that it was just here, and you hear people talking about, oh, give experiences, don't give toys, or give experience. And I'm all for that. Like, hey, give someone experience. I get that. But I will say, like, getting a toy or something like that, it or a video game, like that was an experience for me. Like when I was a kid, like I had memories and experiences because of that game or that toy. I remembered the people I was around and the people that I was with, and it's like a heartfelt, emotion that I have when I see it. It's not just about the thing itself, and who cares what it's worth, right? Like, it's just the feelings that it makes you have. So,
Yeah. 100%.
That's what
Totally
we do,
agree.
man. Raleigh Retro Gamers is we want you to have that nostalgia. If you're a collector, you're obviously you're gonna find stuff for your collection. If you're a gamer, we have free PlayStations. We always have a ton of consoles set up from all different generations, so you can just walk up and play for free. You can find stuff in the vendor marketplace. You can cosplay. I mean, we always have just different things going on. We have music, we have food trucks, and it's just a fun experience. And it's all around gaming. So I wish more places would do that stuff.
Might
We
have to
need more
create a
gaming,
gaming
and I want to
idiot
make gaming
nation
cool again,
spinoff
man. Let's
in
make
Nashville.
gaming cool again. I'm tired of people being like, "Oh man, you're a nerd, you're gaming, or you're living in your mom's basement." No, bro. Like gaming is like the gaming industry is twice the size of the music and movie business, right? As far as from revenue, it's a huge force, and yeah, I wish more people would understand just how awesome and how educational it can be, and all the good stuff that can come from it.
Absolutely.
Well, it's 2025. Let us make gaming great again. The link to all of these things is in the description. It's in the show notes. If you are interested in attending, I definitely want to make my pilgrimage, and that's what it'll be called, a pilgrimage,
We need to
because
all go
I
down
really do
down to
feel a parallel to a lot of the stuff that you were saying, and I have a million more stories that we probably don't have time for this episode. What is very obvious is that you will be back on to just talk more for sure. So again, guys, remember to follow Jeff at all. We have the links here in the description, in the show notes. Make it out to Raleigh if you can. Also, remember our gear as well. Sports Idiot Nation, our t-shirts. Remember, bowl season. You can pick your different colors for your team sucks. The link is in the description as well. New shows, remember, are every Monday and Thursday. Keep gaming great in 2025.
Yes.
Thanks for being on, Jeff, and we will see you Monday.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a blast.
Oh, got balloons. Got balloons.
Okay, all you sinners, follow Sports Idiot Nation on TikTok, X, and Instagram. Like us on Facebook, and remember, the most fun way to watch us is on YouTube every Monday and Thursday. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you can be updated when new content drops. Remember, the podcast can also be found on the usual suspects of Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Always remember, don't be an idiot.
Sinner.